Greetings, welcome back to Ministry Monday. I'm Carlton Coon, and it's an exciting day to be serving God. I'm grateful for my fellow pastors. Quite often I have our church begin to pray in a circle around our own congregation, praying for other churches of similar beliefs and asking for God's favor, for revival to come on them, because the truth of the matter is that their revival is also my revival, and my revival is their revival. You see, we're in this thing together. We need each other, and I appreciate men who serve God. I appreciate families. I appreciate the ladies who make investments. Pastors, I'm on your side. I am a pastor, and regardless of role in a few days of my past life, that's kind of always been my heart. For our saints, some of whom watch Ministry Monday, please don't let anybody convince you that pastors sleep late, that they work 2 days every week and eat chicken every Sunday. Doing the work of God, I think, has always been complex, and these days it's even more. But there is another layer that too often goes unnoticed, and that is that 60% of pastors are bivocational. The average church will have somewhere just under 80 people in attendance on a given Sunday. And in many occasions, that does not afford a full-time pastor, particularly if that is a growing church where that a number of that 80 are new converts, or whether their children are young people. I think it's an unfortunate thing that that particular group of ministry is underappreciated, perhaps underrespected by even their ministerial peers. At least one fellow has been quoted as saying that God owes every preacher a full-time church with a full-time salary. Well, there's no Bible for that particular observation. Paul was extremely well educated, but on more than one occasion he had to make his living and perhaps invest in the renting of a hall in order to have a place for people to come hear him by making tents. So hard physical work, fingers that perhaps would have been pricked with needles and muscles that would have been tired from pulling heavy canvas into place, and then to teach what I'll call a home Bible study each evening, and to be ready to preach and teach on the Sabbath day. Paul was comfortable. He didn't feel insecure being a bivocational church planter. He did not feel that he was less of a man of God, less of an apostle when he was doing those things. And it's interesting, and I think herein lies a solution that helps those who are bivocational. He did what he knew. And what he knew was to preach and teach the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And he moved into the ministry that God had given him. And so this particular week, we're just days away from the beginning of Pastoral Appreciation Month, which is the month of October. I honor and I validate our bivocational pastors. Perhaps it's because it's close to me. My grandfather planted the church in Tioga, Louisiana, and until retiring from a public job of driving a school bus, Grandpa was bivocational. Prior to driving the school bus, he was a logger, and he hauled wood, and then, as I said, drove the school bus. At the same time, he was driving 30 miles from their home in Bentley to the community of Tioga, just outside of Alexandria. The campground of the United Pentecostal Church in Louisiana is there in Tioga. Grandpa was first guy to walk across that property. He saw the sign, and he didn't have a phone back then. He found someone who had a phone. He called S.L. Wise, who was the district superintendent of Louisiana at the time. But Grandpa was planting that church in Tioga, work during the day, go to church, drive 30 miles. The first building that they had to rent had formerly been used as a stable, so it couldn't have been much of a building. Whoever owned it was trying to transition, I guess, to where he could get a little more money out of it. The fellow who was a neighbor, he didn't like having it as a church. So he would open the doors while church wasn't happening. And of course, the cows back then that just wandered about, they would go into the church thinking it was still a stable. And so Grandpa would have to get there very early, and not with a broom. He had to get there with a shovel. David Bernard established a great church in Austin. He did so planting it as a bivocational pastor. I know the records of home missions, and they received just a small Christmas for Christ grant a number of years into the existence of the church to help with that fledgling church buying a piece of property. To my peers in ministry, please don't devalue your brother's contribution to the work of God. Don't look down on the man who works a job in order to establish a church or to keep a church in operation. As a matter of fact, today would be a good day, or sometime this week, to call that man and commend him for the hard work that he does in helping the body of Christ move forward. If it's possible, perhaps do something gracious. And for my younger preacher friends who are coming along, many of you have in mind that in a few years you'll be pastoring 180, 200. You'll be one of the fellows that's driving the nicer car and has the really neat set of golf clubs. But there are going to be a lot of you who God has called, who will spend your entire ministry as bivocational pastors. Doesn't mean that God's calling on you or it doesn't mean any of that is less. It simply means that God has called you to work in a place that may be an extremely hard field. Stay faithful to God. Stay constant in what He has commissioned you to do. You are important to Him and to His work. I honor you on this day. God bless you.